All right, so let me go to Jackson here. First up on the show is H. Jackson Calame, the founder of First Class Business, where they focus on helping businesses with their revenue growth. So, Jackson, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me what you do, and then how did you get involved in it?
Yeah, so I help businesses with sustainable revenue growth. I'm looking for entrepreneurs that have at least 3 to 5 years of experience to work directly with me. If you don't, I got free programs, or I'll refer you to people along your way. But I need people who are ready to move. And that means personal responsibility, like Kalvin said, being ready to be accountable for every action. You as the visionary, right? The buck stops with us for our companies. Everything that happens in my company is ultimately my fault, for good and for bad. I have to be responsible for what I do, right? So how did I get there? Through a process of, one, going back to school and saying, hey, I want to get into the business program. I know I messed up before I left. I got a 0.33 GPA, but I'm ready to shape up. And they laughed me out of the room, basically. So after that, I realized, well, what do? I can get loans and finish my education, or I can find a business owner who's willing to take a chance on me and pursue the path that I know I'm supposed to pursue. So I did just that. I went and got into multi-level marketing, shifted pretty quickly from that to Lifetime Fitness. I was the first sales rep hired in San Antonio that didn't have a degree. I was tenacious. I was persistent. My first 5 years of sales, I got the same compliment, backhanded compliment over and over. Jackson is persistent, which means Jackson's not very convincing or very good at what he does, but he does not stop following up, right? That was my secret for years, was I just got to put in pay my dues and put in the work to get the results. Long story short, Marc, I ended up through a few startups, one invested in by Paul Buchheit, and who's the inventor of Gmail, and Matt Cutts, the search director of Google, where we were doing SEO and helping newspapers with revenue growth. Went from that to Restaurant Connect, where we were bleeding out cash faster than we could count, going and picking up furniture on the side of the road, repainting it to pay our bills while we tried to build up profitability. 3 years later, we're at $36,000 in recurring monthly revenues, had 100 distributors, and we were, open table. Our big competitor was terrified of us. Apple patented our software. So I got to see and learn a lot of interesting truths about business along the way, being part of growing, founding, being a junior co-founder, seeing lawsuits, seeing all these things come together that most business owners have no idea how to deal with or take for granted. And, it's difficult. So then I find myself begging a friend for a job. I was burnt out. I told my business partners too, when my daughter's 3, I need to slow down. It's time for me to be a dad. They said 10 more years. I said, no way. I'm not going to come up to my daughter at 13 years old and say, hi, my name's Dad. Good to meet you. Mm-hmm. Not going to happen, right? So I was a stay-at-home dad. I got to be there, but I wanted to make sure that my presence was more felt, that I got to be the PTA dad, that I got to be the soccer coach, right? So I ended up stepping down, and I ended up calling Jake at Video Power Marketing. Look at videopower.com. They run YouTube ads. They're one of the best in the world at YouTube ads. And we did some of the most viral YouTube campaigns with massive ROIs. And I got to learn how to shift from doing business the hard way, the traditional way, to creating virality so that you could have conversions coming in through the web. And that was one of the most eye-opening changes, because here was somebody who was living his best life, not being persistent, being reliable, though, and consistent in what he did, patient with the process, just authentically showing up how he should be, and life was coming to him in abundance. 70,000 people per month coming to the website. Google asking him to represent YouTube ads, rather the founder of YouTube calling him up on the phone and asking him to represent YouTube ads. I had the opportunity to shadow him and watch what he did in his life. I was like, dude, this guy he doesn't try to convince anybody. He just lives the right way. I got to be doing that more often in my life. So all those elements, you can notice Kalvin and I both, we seem to stick to principles, right? It's the principles that drive the victories. That's cultivating a harvest. It's the law of the harvest, not the law of the microwave, right? So teaching entrepreneurs to start looking at, like Heather said, the internal. What can I learn internally about me that will help manifest the types of life activities, the types of experiences that I want to have?
One thing I noticed about that journey, like as you're going through, there was a lot of other people involved. Like you went and you learned from people and you grew with people. And when you came to a point where you were unemployed and you wanted to find a new path, you were like, I know who to call. What did cultivating that type of network where it was people who did things and knew things that you didn't, but you had the comfort level with them of being like, I can call this person and just see if I can add value?
You know, we have to, if you're listening right now, you have the ability to choose to make that pivot now. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't matter when I learned it, right? But I learned at a young age because my dad was out of the picture by the time I was 4. I was an uncle at the age of 9. And when I held my nephew for all of like 2 seconds and gave him back because I was scared I was going to drop him, I didn't know what I was doing, but I turned around and I had a thought. I thought, I want to be a dad. What's a dad? And I realized, like, man, I didn't have an example on like what to do. My dad did a lot of good things in the picture as well, but not that consistent day to day. How do you show up? So I start watching my brother-in-law and every little thing that he did. And I start watching other dads and start noticing, like, oh man, that dad just dragged his kid out of church by his ear. I don't want to be like that dad. The other dad that picks his son up, walks him to the back. I see him like kneel down, get on his level, and start to talk to him and calm him down. I'm like, I want to be a dad like that. I've been both dads, by the way. It's hard when you got kids. It's hard. But I'm always watching, and I'm always willing to ask. I was a favorite person that anybody who I dated, their dads loved me because I came in and I was like, hey, what do you do, sir? Tell me about that. How did you get there? And this guy's like, oh my gosh, like he's willing to talk to me about anything. And I was genuinely curious. He's like, you can have my daughter home whenever you want. And he knew I was going to take advantage of that. I didn't want to. I didn't need to. It was just I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn everything I could about how do I get ahead in life because I felt like I was behind. So. And
here's a question for anybody listening, because I feel like people get really intimidated by people like that, right? That they want to learn from, and they're like, they don't want to waste their time on me. So how often have you come against someone who just didn't want to waste their time sharing information with you?
Plenty enough as a missionary.
That context is a little different.
I'm glad you say that, right? Mentors love to teach. They love to mentor, right? They really do. And so, I think one of the things I wish I'd learned earlier, though, to stack the point is if we're not paying attention to how to have healthy relationships, we will end up gravitating towards people we probably shouldn't learn from. So you got to study out what a healthy relationship looks like and then go towards those individuals and ask for help. And, some people will help you for the sake of their own gain, right? Other people will help you because they want to, they're sincere about it. They don't have anything to gain from it. And so that doesn't mean that people who have something to gain are only doing it because they have something to gain. So recognizing how to take a step back and understand the situations. For instance, I've got 2 CPAs that I use, and they both know each other, and I've introduced them to each other on purpose. I want to see who mudslings. I want to see who treats people with respect and who has that law of abundance mindset. I've had 10 CPAs that I've worked with and consider bringing into the picture over the last 2 years. And some of them I turn to because I don't have any transaction with them, and I want their external perspective of, if you were in these shoes, what would that look like? Now, it's my job to send them $100 afterwards, but that's not necessarily why they're helping me, right? I should take care of that individual. But there's certain times where you don't have that, and you need to pay the favor later, but you can always ask for help. It's just, you got to get out of your own way and be willing to do it.
Choose your hard.
So we're about out of time on your segment here, but when it comes to outside counsel, I think that this kind of plays into what we're talking about, at least a little bit. But because you're talking about having a couple CPAs and just kind of watching, but it's always good to get other information. But when somebody already has a team, a coach or mentor, why is it important to then maybe look for outside counsel?
Auditing is a big piece of that, and entrepreneurs are notorious for delegating by abdication or handing things off without saying, I don't want to do this anymore, so I'll let somebody else figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then you don't end up getting the results you want. So I had a client who they were delegating to a VA, and the VA was a little bit underpaid, and had a team of 20 working underneath them as well with this client. And I started doing an audit with the VA, and I offered them, I was going to negotiate equity on their behalf because of what they had built and get them a salary raise, et cetera. And so that process was interesting. All of a sudden, her team in the Philippines didn't want to work with our team in Pakistan, and there was this law of scarcity coming out. And so I started digging into reports more and more and began to realize that, wait a second, some of these reports aren't adding up. They looked like they were, and it seemed like they were, but there was a reason clients weren't getting results. Well, next thing you know, we've got a VA in the Philippines for this company, for this client of mine, who sent a notice to all of the clients that the business owner was not paying them and was taking advantage of women in the Philippines. And she's starting to light his business on fire. So I got to get ahead of that for him, and I start writing an email to the rest of the VA saying, "Hey, here's what's happening. We did not know if you're not getting paid. We need to find out." So I found out through the process that he was paying that VA directly, who was supposed to be paying the other 20 employees on that list. They were all being held hostage, and a couple of them responded. Most of them stayed with her. They were worried. They feared. She was a big, powerful person in their city, and they didn't think they would be able to get a job outside of her. A couple came back. One of them told us, "Jackson, I'm so glad you reached out. I was fired for having a baby. I did not get compensated for my last month, and I was let go because I missed work because I took maternity leave for 1 day."
Oh my gosh.
Who was taking advantage? Not the person sounding the alarm. Oh, it was the person sounding the alarm who was blaming the entity for doing it, because I had found out that she wasn't reporting honest work. She was fabricating the entire report. They weren't doing what she said they were doing. So, and when you bring somebody in from an external perspective to audit, my job was never to get her in trouble. I wanted her to have equity. I wanted her to belong to the long-term vision, because she was, in my eyes, according to the reports, a unicorn. But I found out the hard way that sometimes your closest allies, those who you think are your closest allies, your closest friends, actually aren't. Yeah.
So auditing, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, Jackson, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn, your favorite social media platform. You can call me, 210-683-9307. It's 210-683-9307. Happy to take a phone call as well.
Thanks, buddy. Always
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Likewise.